All right, everyone. So everyone should be on week 4 of their training program. So we're kind of halfway through, and we're going to talk about nutrition because there are some things that you should know about, and in order to get the maximum benefits from the training that you're doing, and make sure that you're not doing anything that is going um, to let's see. I need to share my screen. Here we go. Okay, so we are going to talk about nutrition today. We want to make sure that we're maximizing the most of what you're getting out of your training. And we're going to talk about a couple of things. So first, when we talk about nutrition, most people will probably think about weight loss. So let's talk about that briefly, because if you are running to lose weight, then this is going to be important to you. But we'll, as we kind of go through this, these are more guidelines. Everyone's a little bit different, and there's probably a bigger discussion that you should have. So right now, it's known that in order for you to lose 1 pound, you need to burn 3,500 calories. And that is either burning them through exercise or reducing your calorie intake by that much. So you're obviously not going to do that all in one day. The best way to kind of do it is do it gradually over time. So you want to either reduce or burn 500 calories per day so that you lose a pound of weight a week. So that would mean that you'd have to reduce or burn your calories, be 500 times 7 to get those 3,500 calories and lose 1 pound of weight. Now, at the same time, you're not expected to run 7 days a week. It's not really sustainable for most people. There are some people that are running and have, what they'll call a running streak that lasts, maybe 100 days or maybe a lifetime, who knows. But you don't want to do, run every day. You need those breaks for a variety of reasons. And especially when you're training for a race, if that is your goal, you want to make sure that you're well rested and that you're not showing up on race day tired or worse, injured because you've overtrained. So, running for most people is, 1 hour will burn about 600 calories. And so if you're running a couple times a week, say it's 3 or 4 times a week, you're still not going to lose that pound of weight. But if you're doing it in conjunction with reducing your calorie and by eating right, then that is something that can be gained. So it's not strictly a counting calories type of of an equation. It's not as simple as that, and many people don't count calories. It's very hard to do, especially if you're eating out, or if you're eating out now, it's recommended, or it's not even recommended. I think it's now mandatory that restaurants post, what how many calories are in a meal, especially in fast food restaurants. So if you're eating out, it makes it really easy. It's not always the healthiest, especially at fast food restaurants. But if you're cooking at home, it's very hard to kind of calculate unless you're measuring your food, and there's not a lot of people that are doing that. So exercise is a great way of burning those calories and losing weight through exercise, but reducing calories and either by reducing portion sizes, and maybe reducing snacking, maybe cutting back on certain foods that are high caloric intake, are going to help then reduce your weight. So specifically, if you're eating out at fast food restaurants, that right there alone, just cutting that out is going to make a huge difference. Cutting out, soft drinks like sodas, that's going to make a huge difference as well. Most importantly, if you really need help in, losing weight and doing it properly, you should speak to a registered dietitian to find out about the right foods to eat, because it's not just about the calorie, it's also about the macronutrients and micronutrients, and kind of making sure that you're eating well balanced to get all the nutrients that you need, um, so that you have the energy to function for every day, but also for physical exercise, especially if you're in this type of training program. So I would not recommend jumping on any type of fad type diet. There's a lot of that are out there, and some of them work for some people and some of them don't. Some of them have actually been proven to be even dangerous to some people. So before you go on any type of these diets, please consult with a registered dietitian. So just by running, you're going to help improve your health and reduce weight if that's something that you want to do. If you really want to see dramatic changes, you're going to have to think about what you're eating and what you're putting into your body. So what we're doing is now is we're going to move forward, talk specifically about nutrition when it comes to athletic performance. So one of the things that we want to look at for the most part when it comes to running is using carbs. Carbs are the most efficient fuel source to process and turn into energy for intense training. And there's a couple variations of the carbs. So you have healthy and what's called complex carbs that you want for daily nutrition. There's you can get it in dairy, pasta, cereals, oats, breads, vegetables, and fruits. But you also have to kind of be careful because you may want to choose some healthier options. Cereals, if they're kind of like the fruity kind, the kids type cereals, they're going to have a lot of sugar in it, and that's going to negate any of the calories that you burn up, and may actually increase your caloric intake because of so much sugar that's in there. And depending on how much is processed in there, it may not be all natural. So take a look at that as well. But if you're eating a healthy cereal or even things like oatmeal, that can be a good source of complex carbs that you can use for just daily, everyday nutrition. Complex carbs also contain more fiber, and because of that, they are digested slower, and they help you feel full and supply long-term energy. So it's a slow burning type of fuel that sustains your body throughout the day. But if you take too many complex carbs, if you eat a big meal and it has a lot of complex carbs in it, you're going to have issues if you're then going out running. So you want to make sure that if you are eating before you run and they are complex carbs, that you give yourself some time for that to digest before you actually go out and you go for a run. So take that into consideration as you're planning your runs. You want to make sure you don't eat a big meal. Now, one of the things that is kind of known in running is that you want to carb load before a big race. And typically that means pasta, eating spaghetti. And that's what typically a lot of these marathon runners and even half marathoners, that's kind of what they eat the night before. And same thing, it does have those complex carbs. It will provide that fuel, but it needs time to digest. So you don't want to eat a huge meal the night before a race. Eating pasta is going to be good and will provide you those fuel that you need for race day. But at the same time, you don't want to kind of cram it all in the night before a race. Eating, maybe pasta 2 or 3 days prior will also help without you having to feel like you have to, fill your whole plate or even get second servings to get that complete, carb loading experience. So just be careful with that. So the other carb that we'll look at is basically simple carbs, and they're easier to break down, and they provide immediate energy. And because they break down easier, they're easier to get into your stomach and into your gastrointestinal system. Now, one thing that you kind of have to know and understand is, your body is going to divert blood flow to where it feels it needs it the most, depending on the activity that you're doing. So if you're running, it's going to, and especially if you're, let's say it is a race, and you're really kind of pushing the effort, it's going to divert blood to a couple places. It's going to divert it to the lungs, to the heart to get that blood pumping, but it's also going to divert it to the legs, and it's going to pull it from areas where in the body where it feels like, well, these are not really important for this type of activity. So it pulls it away from your stomach and your gastrointestinal system. So that means it becomes harder for you to, process foods, and things like complex carbs become even harder to process. And that's why we want to go with simple carbs, because it does go in the stomach easier. It creates a less, gastrointestinal distress, so you have less stomach issues. So examples of simple carbs would be like fruit and vegetable juices, soda, sports gel, energy drinks, table sugar, maple syrup, and candy. So these are all things that you can use in a pinch and say, if you're out for a run and you got nothing, but you feel like you could use a little kind of pick me up, a candy could work, fruit juice could work, soda in some instances for longer distance races. For specifically, I think for marathon and for ultra distance trail runs, they take soda and they let it go flat so that you can drink it without the carbonation, but it provides that simple sugar, and it's a great way of getting that quick boost of energy to keep you going for those long distances. So much so that there are companies that now produce a cola flavored gel and drink to kind of provide that taste, because I've taken it and it actually tastes pretty good. I mean, it's sweet and it's something that you kind of want and almost look forward to when you're at those longer distances. Plus, it typically has caffeine in it, and that gives you a little bit of an extra boost. So now we're going to look at glucose and glycogen, because this is kind of plays into the carbs. Carbohydrates are broken down into smaller sugar units called glucose, and the excess glucose is then stored as glycogen in the liver and the muscles. So your body retains that, and it uses the glycogen when you're for these type of activities, specifically when it's higher efforts in your activity. So it's important to kind of have that. And that's why when you talk about carb loading, that's sort of kind of what's happening is you're taking those carbs, typically those complex carbs that are in pasta, and you then kind of store them in your body as glycogen eventually, so that when you need it on race day, you have them available. Now, any additional carbs that your body doesn't need then get converted into fat, and fat is a fuel source as well. But the difference is that glycogen is quick burning. It's kind of like I said, it's a version of those simple carbs. They get absorbed into your gastrointestinal and then spreads that to the rest of your body to provide that energy. So I kind of feel like, and the best way I can say it is glycogen is rocket fuel. It's kind of what you need for those high intense efforts, but there's a limited supply. And then fat is a slow burning. And typically once you run out of glycogen, then your body switches to fat. But in order for it to switch to fat, because it is slow burning, your body then has to slow down. And typically this is kind of where the term bonking happens. It's where your body starts slowing down and it can't move at the pace that it was previously, because now it's saying, okay, well, I'm still in motion, I still need to move, but I need to switch fuel sources because I'm out of the quick burning stuff, and I need to switch to the slow burning. And that slow burning means that the body needs to move slower in order to process it, because it can't convert that to energy quickly. So how much fuel do you need? Well, everyone's going to be a little bit different, but the body typically has enough glycogen for 60 to 90 minutes of hard effort. After that, it's gone. And then like I mentioned previously, your glycogen will then, when it's depleted, will switch over to the fuel source of fat, and it'll slow down. And that fat then is what starts giving you that energy, but it does kind of feel like you've bonked and you kind of hit that wall. You've gone from moving very quickly to now moving very slowly. And everyone at some point has always hit that wall and bonked. And it's, it can be avoided through taking in nutrition at certain intervals, because if you take too much at one time, then you start having the gastrointestinal issues where your body can't process it quick enough. It can only take it in slow doses, especially if you haven't trained your body to take that much, at a particular time. So for 5K and 10K distances, and it really depends on, your speed, and how quickly you can complete those distances. But for most people, you're not going to need a whole lot of energy because, as I mentioned, your body has enough glycogen for 60 to 90 minutes. So, like I said, for most people, you don't need any additional fuel. What you need is, to make sure that you've taken enough carbs in the night before, or maybe in a couple of days prior to your race. So through that carb loading, you should have enough, glycogen in your body that has built up over 2 days that it doesn't need additional fuel. Of course, you're going to be hungry, and we always recommend that a race day morning you wake up early enough to eat a light meal, and that could be a bagel. Sometimes I've done a bagel with some peanut butter. Sometimes it's a bagel and or toast with banana. If you drink coffee, you can have coffee. But coffee is also kind of a diuretic, so you will get dehydrated. So you need to give yourself some time to replenish your fluids if that's what you're doing. But you want to eat a light meal a couple hours before your race so that it gives your body time to start processing that. And if you need to use the bathroom, then you're able to do so. And then maybe, depending on how you feel, you might want to take a gel 15 minutes before the start of a 10K. I don't think you need a gel for a 5K. For the most part, what you've eaten, if you've eaten properly, in the days leading up to your race, if it's a 5K and you eat a light meal a couple hours before your race, then you won't need a gel for a 5K. But for a 10K, it might be a good idea to kind of top off the tank and make sure you have enough for the full distance. So now we're going to talk about recovery. And, protein is one of those things that is highly recommended that you take, and it could be taken in a variety of forms. Now, it used to be, because the science is constantly changing and research is constantly being done, and it used to be that in order to maximize your recovery, you had to take within a certain window, typically 30 minutes after your race. And that made it difficult for some people because not everyone has access to protein right after a race. Typically, chocolate milk is something that you probably would have access to, but you have to plan to bring it with you and maybe keep it cold, and then drink it right after. The research now shows that you don't have to have a window. You just have to eat it sometime during that day. So obviously, the closer you do it, after your race, the better. But you don't lose any benefits, true benefits, if it's not taken within that 30-minute window. You could take it several hours later. So, and that could be things like I said, chocolate milk, a protein shake, nuts, PBJ, or other protein-rich food. And like I said, it depends on your race. It could be chicken or some sort of other meat, depending on how hungry you are. It could be eggs if it's early in the morning and you haven't had a real breakfast. Then after your race, you have breakfast and you can get your protein that way. But the most important thing is going to be sleep. A good night's sleep is important for recovery and for performance. So sleep allows your body to kind of heal and get that rest it needs. So as your muscle breaks down through training, it needs that time to rebuild and heal, and sleep does that. If you start cutting back on your sleep, especially if it's dramatic, you are not going to get the full potential from your training. You are going to go to your next workout and you're going to be tired. Your muscles are going to probably feel sore than they normally would be if you had gotten a full night's sleep. And everyone's going to be a little bit different. Some people need 8 hours, some people need 10, some people can do it in 5 or 6, but everyone's a little bit different. But ideally, you want the more rest that you can get, the better it is for you. So don't, eliminate rest. And rest could be simply just being off your feet, especially if you're doing a hard run or a long run. It's okay then to kind of prop your feet up and allow blood flow to enter your legs and muscles. There's things like compression socks that improve blood flow to help speed recovery. There's other things like compression boots and some other high-tech stuff that will also aid in that recovery. But other things that you have to kind of understand and remember is that a lot of the studies that are done on high performance athletes. We're talking individuals that their job is to perform. They're training 6 to 8 hours a day, and in most instances they're doing multiple workouts in a day. They may do a run in the morning and a run in the afternoon, and in between they're doing things like stretching or yoga or maybe even weight training, but that is their job. So a lot of their research revolves around these high performance athletes. We are not high performance athletes. For us, it's recreation. It's a hobby. It's not something that we're looking to to get that really high performance gain. So for us, our work, our job, our what we do every day can cause stress, and it's stress on the body, it's stress on the mind. So you have to use recovery and those breaks to kind of rest and relax to address all the types of stresses. And most importantly, it would probably be those that are from your day-to-day life. That could be a job, it could be family, it could be other commitments, it could be volunteer work. All these things that are part of your life are causing some amount of stress on you, on your body, on your mind. So finding ways of reducing that stress, eating properly, getting enough sleep, maybe meditation or yoga, or getting massages, whether you're paying someone, like a sports massage therapist, or you're using foam rollers, things like that are going to help you as well in your recovery. So all that's really important, not just for training, but also for the other stresses in your life. So this is a little bonus information because at this point, for a 5K and 10K program, it's, you're going to be in that lower end of maybe hour and a half, where you don't really need a whole lot of fuel. And as far as gels or sports drinks or things like that, and we'll cover a little bit more of that here in a little bit. But as I mentioned previously, running typically burns about 600 calories, depending on the individual. So that's kind of about an average, 100 calories every 10 minutes, or 100 calories per mile. So if you're running a 10-minute mile, it's 100 calories. And it really almost doesn't matter whether you're running a 6-minute mile or a 10-minute mile or a 12-minute mile. It's going to average out to around 100 calories for every 10 minutes. But the thing about it is that your body can only consume 200 to 250 calories per hour. So you can see that there's a little bit of deficiency there, because if you're running for an hour and you burn up 600 calories, your body can only consume only a portion of those calories that you burn. So there's a mistake that we tend to make when we learn this, that we say, well, then I need to consume 600 calories, especially when we're talking about longer distances. So when we're talking a marathon or an ultra or a half Ironman. But our body can only consume 200 to 250 until you train it. And I've talked to some individuals that have trained themselves to take as much as, I think 400 to 600 calories per hour. But that takes time to do. But so you can't really, without training your body to consume that amount of calories, you can't expect your body to do that. Otherwise, you'll experience those GI issues. In other words, too many calories in your gastrointestinal system at one time are going to create issues like bloating and other issues that are going to have you running to find a bathroom. So your long distance will require, training the gut to consume those calories. But as I've mentioned previously, your body also has a large amount of calories and fat. It's slower to burn, but you do have them there. And typically, once again, unless you're at that high level, when you start getting into longer distances, you're going to run much slower. The pace that you run in a 5K is not the pace that you're going to run in a marathon. It's not going to be the pace that you're going to run in an Ironman. It's not going to be the pace that you run in an ultra distance. It's going to significantly be slower during the longer distances. So it might be okay for you to slow down so that you can use the fat that you have stored as fuel, and then just supplement it with additional calories like those simple, carbs that are found in gels or candies or or soda, things like that. Sports drinks. So, like I said, this is bonus information because you're all doing 5K and 10K. But I want to bring that up. If you're considering down the road to go longer distances, there is going to be a caloric deficiency, because you're burning more calories than your body can consume. And that's where you can run the risk of bonking if you don't take calories on a regular basis at certain intervals to kind of keep your body going. And that's where, fueling strategy comes into play. So now we're going to move into fluids. So daily consumption of water is what we're talking about here for the most part. Just for everyday life, this is what you should be doing. It should be half your body weight in ounces. So if you weigh 150 pounds, you're recommended, 75 ounces of water per day. So what does that mean? That's 3.75 bottles of water. Actually, if it's 20 ounce, because this should be 20 ounce bottles, because I looked it up, and typically, if most water bottles, like your regular Dasani or Aquafina type of water bottle, is going to be 20 ounces. So you'd be drinking almost 4 of those bottles a day. So that sort of kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of what you should be drinking. That doesn't count, for what you drink or should be drinking if you're running or after a run. So it also does not include things like soda, coffee, tea, or fruit juices, or sports drinks. It just should be the amount of water that you're taking in. Even if you were doing no running, this is what's recommended, is to drink half your body weight in ounces. So keep that in mind. That'll help with issues once you do start, or when you go out for a run. It may mean you can go out for a bit without having to carry fluids with you if you're properly hydrated. And it will also help prevent certain injuries and issues that you may have due to dehydration, like cramps on a run, but also post-run or outside a run where your muscles or tendons may get tight and you may get those knots that can create pain. So for me, I started having issues when I was drinking much less than this. I was probably drinking, half of what I was recommended to take for my body weight. So I was probably maybe drinking only 2 bottles of water a day. And so over time, I got more and more dehydrated, and that then ended up affecting my calves and my Achilles. And in doing so, it just got tighter and tighter to where I started feeling pain on my heel that was causing plantar fasciitis. So keep that in mind. Once I was able to, stretch and get fluids back in, I was able to alleviate the pain altogether. But that did affect me for several weeks until I figured out what it was. And it was a combination of, knots in my calf, tightness in my tendons, all due primarily because I was not hydrating enough. So let's see here. And next slide here. So during exercise, it'll vary based on your body and every individual based on your size, weight, but it's recommended anywhere from 16 to 30 ounces of water per hour. So most of you right now, because the training plan should only be, running, definitely less than an hour. So all of you should be drinking it within this range here of 16 to 30 ounces. Probably less than that because most of you probably aren't running a full hour yet. Especially if you're 5K. If you're 10K, you might be at that depending on your pace. So, the question is, do you know your sweat rate? And you're like, well, what is that? How do I measure it? Well, basically, your sweat rate is the amount of water lost during an hour of exercise. And the way you do this is before you go out for a run, you have to have a scale to do this. You get on a scale, but you get on a scale completely naked, wearing no clothes, and you weigh yourself. And you make a note of what you weigh. Then you go out and you run for an hour. And you do not take any fluids. You don't drink any water. You drink any sports drink. You just go out and you run for an hour. You can do this on the treadmill if you want. You can do this out, on the roads. But after that hour, you once again get naked, jump on the scale, and note your weight, and then you subtract. You figure out how much sweat did you lose. Whatever that amount is that you've lost in weight, that is the amount that you have to drink, to make up for that difference. So if you lost a pound, it says I need to drink 16 ounces because I think 16 ounces is a pound. I should have looked that up beforehand. But that's kind of where you figure that out is you figure out how much pounds you've lost in sweat and calculate that into ounces, and that's the amount that you should be drinking. So that gives you an idea of what you should be drinking per hour. Everyone's going to be a little bit different. Some people sweat a lot. Some people don't sweat as much. I've seen some individuals that go out for a run and they are totally completely soaked and their shoes are completely soaked to where their shoes are squishing from the amount of sweat that has dripped, from their body, and they're completely drenched. And it may take, a day or two for their shoes to dry out. That's someone that has a very high sweat rate. They may be closer to those 30 ounces of water per hour. So that's how you kind of determine how much you should be drinking. So for the most part, I think, you don't have to carry water with you if you're going for short distances, but you will be dehydrated afterwards and you will slow down during your run and you will feel thirsty, and that will affect you mentally. And you may want to slow down, stop, quit, or maybe if you're expected, to run, let's say, 4 miles on that day, but you're feeling thirsty at 2.5, you may quit at mile 3. So not having the fluids can affect your training because mentally you feel like, okay, I need water. I'm just going to quit. I'm thirsty. And so for that reason, I recommend that you run with bottled water, some sort of, handheld type of bottle so that you can take it with you so that when you feel thirsty, you drink from it, and then you don't find an excuse to cut your run short because you happen to be thirsty. If you have the water with you, you're not going to feel thirsty. So those are things that I would recommend. And then sports drinks is one of those things that at this point I would not recommend at a 5K and 10K distance to really get into. to carry with you to your run. Water should be sufficient. And the reason I say this is because of the amount of calories and sugar and carbs and that you have in there. So I would recommend that for once you start getting into longer distances and you're out there running longer. I mean, they're designed specifically for exercise, but once again, these are typically these drinks are designed in a research lab when they're testing out high performance athletes. We're talking elite athletes, Olympians, professional athletes. So while they will work for someone that's running a 5K, if you're as I said previously, an hour is 600 calories that you're burning up. If you're not running an hour and you say you're running a half hour, you're only running 30 minutes, then you're only burning up 300 calories. But if you drink, a sports drink, either during the run or after the run, now you've gained 200 calories and you're only a deficit of 100 calories. And that's not bad if unless you're trying to lose weight. And on top of that, you have the additional sugar and carbs that are associated with it. So this is a reason why a lot of people that go out and are using exercise, whether it's running or elliptical or Orange Theory or any type of aerobic type activity, and if they're drinking sports drinks, then and they're not losing weight, it's typically the reason why is because they're not going in that calorie deficiency. They're not losing as much. So it makes it much harder if for every day that you're working out, you're only burning 100 calories because you replenished 200 of them in a 30-minute workout, or even if it is an hour workout, you expected to burn 600 calories and you're replenishing with 200, and now you're at 400. So it may take you longer to see that weight loss. So I would say best for runs that are over 90 to 120 minutes, simply because that's where that intermittent fueling takes place. So it could be a gel, it could be a sports drink, it could be a combination of both depending on the distance. And that's one of those things that I'd say you really kind of have to think about what that strategy is going to be. If you're doing those longer distances, figure out what's on course, where are the water stations, where are the sports drink stations, and if they're providing gels, what gels are on course and what do you need to bring. But like I said, that's for longer distances. 5K and 10K distances, you should be fine with water because especially in the heat, the first thing that you will feel is thirst. You will not feel the loss of energy until, like I said, 60 to 90 minutes. You will first feel thirsty before you feel any loss of energy. So water should be sufficient for what you're doing. Except like I mentioned previously, if you're doing a 10K, you may want to take a gel beforehand just to kind of top off that your fuel tank. So the other thing about sports drinks is that's beneficial is it includes electrolytes. So electrolytes are sodium, potassium, calcium, and magnesium. And what they do is they conduct electricity when mixed with water, and they help regulate nerve and muscle function. And they also help maintain the body's acid-base level or pH level. So it kind of helps keep the body completely balanced and functioning properly. Signs of low electrolytes, and typically if you're out running, especially now that it's getting warmer and you're sweating, you may actually feel the salt and maybe even see the salt, especially wearing dark clothing and you're sweating, you may see the salt stains on your clothes. You may actually taste it in your sweat. You may actually feel it on your face, feeling like it's a little bit gritty, and that's the salt that your body has sweated. It's all the sodium that's coming from your pores. So what ends up happening is when that leaves a body through sweat, then that's where you start experiencing muscle cramps, a twitching in your muscles, and that's where you may start feeling some weakness as well. And that's where, sports drinks can come into play as you start, because that's going to happen at longer distances. It will take a lot of sweat to lose those electrolytes, and like I said, at that hour-and-a-half mark is probably typically where you're going to see it, not so much at the 60-minute mark, but that 90-minute mark is when you may start seeing it. So in order to decrease the amounts of electrolytes lost and replenish them, especially if you're going longer, then a sports drink will help. And there are gels that also contain electrolytes that can help with that as well. And that's why there's a lot of different options for you. So what we'll look at next real quickly, because our nutrition sponsor is GU Energy, and so they provided this handy little slide here to kind of illustrate some of the things that you can use and the options. And a lot of this comes down to your own personal preference or taste, because everyone's a little bit different, and some people react differently to the different type of way that you can consume these calories and these carbs. So one of the newest one that's come out is a Stroopwafel, and basically this is something that in Europe primarily became a favorite, I think, from cyclists, especially a lot of the Tour de France riders would typically stop in bakery shops and they would pick this up because it had exactly what they needed. It had the simple sugars, it was light and easy to digest, and it fit very nicely in their jersey pocket because they were very thin. So it is a waffle type of product that is, it's two waffles kind of sandwiched with a, typically it's more like a honey type of substance. And GU has made this now that's flavored and has a way that you can now eat this nutrition. And typically this would be something that I would say you might want to take this before the start of a 10K in those, maybe 30 to 15 minutes, consume it just so that you feel, and like I said, your tank is topped off and you have enough energy for that race. Probably wouldn't do it for a 5K, but I think a 10K would work as well. The other option would be, going with an actual gel. And as you can see in both of these, this one has amino acids, which kind of helps in that, your muscles, because it does provide, it helps manage the protein, and it's an additional fuel source, but it helps with the recovery. Typically, the amino acids work very well when you start getting into longer distances, but it does have sodium, and as you can see here, it does have 150 calories, and that's one of the great things about GU Energy is that it's very clear what you're getting on the front label. I think they've got in the back, they've got some more details to the label, but you can look at the front of the package and it clearly tells you what they have. So 5 minutes before the start, you could have a gel instead of the waffle. This one is 100 calories. So, if you don't feel like you need a whole lot, 100 calories would be sufficient for fueling for a 10K. Once again, it does have some sodium there that you will sweat some out. It's a small amount. I've seen some products out there, especially when you start getting into longer distances where you're going to need more sodium, or maybe if you're a heavy sweater, you're going to need more sodium, that has as much as 200 milligrams of sodium. So this is kind of on average for gels and for the average person. So this is something to kind of look at. And the gels is maybe not what everyone likes. Some people will and there's different flavors out there, but remember, you're going to be taking some, at least for a 5K, or a 10K, you may want to take this before the race, and if you're doing it 5 to 15 minutes before, you'll be fine. You typically won't have any issues with it. But if you're running, trying to take something that is maybe a little thick, may be harder to take. And it's always recommended that you take a gel and with water, because it helps dilute it. It helps get down into your stomach a little bit easier. So you have things like the Stroopwafel that is an option. You have the gels that are an option. And then, what they recommend is, 100 to 150 calories per hour with one energy gel, and you take that every 45 minutes. So once again, this starts playing into the longer distances. Once you start getting into that 90 minutes, then this is where you want to take it, because if you've taken one at the beginning of your race, and you take one 45 minutes later, that would be for something that is going to be, typically 90 minutes or longer, because you wouldn't want to take these any closer together, because it would be too much calories and may cause some stomach issues for some people, depending on their stomachs and what they can take. So you want to spread that out. So typically on the run or any type of event, once again, 90 minutes or more, this is where you want to start doing those intervals and fueling strategy, to where you start calculating, how often you're going to take something. So this is where we start getting those longer distances. So once again, this is going to be a little bit of a bonus material. Once again, fluids, 16 to 30 ounces. So a small bike bottle has about 16 ounces. Those Dasani water bottles are typically about 20 ounces. Once you start getting those longer distances, now you're thinking about doing, taking multiple gels. You may need, for a 2 hour, you're going to need 2 gels, and you're going to have to take water with it. And this is where you want to make sure that for those longer distances, if you're doing a half marathon or a marathon, there's water on the course. You want to time, when you take these gels, so that you can also take it with water, or take it right before you get to the water station, so that you can then help ease the gel into your stomach. And once again, as it gets longer, you want to increase it, typically, once again, every 45 minutes. Work out, 3 hours, 3:30, 4 hours, and we're talking, more and more. So for someone that is, an elite runner and is running in a little over 2 hours, they're not going to need quite so many gels. But for the rest of us that are not running at that level, you're going to require some gels to take with you, and that's where it becomes important to carry some of it with you if it's not going to be on the course. And we always recommend that you experiment with these type of fluids and gels before race day, so that your body gets used to it and you don't go into a race not knowing how it's going to affect your body. So once again, you start increasing it, but you also have things like chews, because once again, not everyone is going to like the consistency of a gel, and they can't swallow it. Some people have said they've kind of gagged on it. So there's different options like chews, and there's different consistencies and different products that are out there. GU also makes a sports drink, and this is one of the things that you can say, okay, well, if I'm going to carry my own fluids, now maybe you can carry those sports drink in your bottle, in your handheld bottle, that you can now run with, and now you're carrying those calories and those carbs in a liquid form. Once again, it becomes very easy to take and to consume, and may be easier on your stomach as well, because now it's kind of diluted and it's going in with water. So those are things to kind of consider as you're kind of going through it. But once again, at this point, it's, the most important thing to kind of consider and to be concerned about is your daily nutrition, making sure that you're eating the right foods, that you're eating enough carbs, both primarily complex carbs that will provide you the fuel that you need for every day and for those runs that are on the training plan. And probably right now you shouldn't worry about those simple carbs, because you're not, maybe not at the distance that you need to be. But on race day, you may want to start thinking about that. It's not necessary at this point. I think once we get into, if you're interested in getting into a half marathon, then everything else becomes a little bit more, relevant for that type of distance. So for now, I think that you need to concentrate, like I said, on your basic daily nutrition, making sure you're eating the proper foods, the right amount of foods, making sure you're getting properly hydrated, that you're, sleeping well enough for these, type of training that's going to be the 5K, 10K distance, and to help reduce stress, that sleep, but also look at, either working with a sports massage therapist or doing things to stretch and to foam roll and to alleviate those tight muscles and tendons that are going to be in your legs in order to maximize the most out of your training. So I'll open up to questions. I'm going to hit the stop record button here now.